The twin suns of Varthex 9 burned hot in the orange sky. Below them, rows of armored warriors stood proud. Their spears pointed to the sky. They were the Dravari, a warrior race known across the stars for their strength and discipline. For centuries, they had conquered planets with muscle and tradition. They believed in honor, in combat face to face, in power that could crush mountains. No one had ever stood against them for long. And now, they had set their eyes on a new species, humans. Commander Kale stood at the edge of the war table, his claws tapping against the surface. He stared at a holographic map, showing a small human research station on the edge of Dravari space. "Our scouts say they are weak," one warrior said. "Small numbers, strange tools. No warriors to defend them." Kal grinned, his teeth sharp and full of pride. "Then let's greet them with fire," he said. "Let them know we are watching." The fleet of Dravari ships left orbit an hour later, silent and swift. They didn't consider this a battle, it was a warning. A show of power to the newcomers who dared to build near Dravari space. No one expected resistance. When the ships reached the human station, there was no movement. The place looked quiet, peaceful, almost abandoned. Still, the Dravari warriors landed in full armor, stomping across the dust-covered ground. They kicked open the doors of the main structure. Empty, not a single human in sight. Did they flee? One soldier asked, confused. Kal frowned, looking around carefully. "Too quiet," he muttered. The walls were clean, the systems still running. No signs of a fight, no signs of panic, just silence. Then one of the warriors screamed. Everyone turned, weapons ready. But there was nothing, only the warrior on the ground, eyes wide in shock, on his armor. A small device blinked once and exploded. Smoke filled the room, and chaos followed from hidden speakers. A voice spoke. It was calm, human, and cold. "You attacked without cause," it said. "You wanted to test us, so now we test you." Explosions shook the structure as more traps activated. Walls collapsed, systems overloaded. And the Dravari scrambled for the exits, but outside, their ships were already destroyed, burned down by precision strikes. Kal stood in the smoke, eyes burning with fury. "This isn't war," he shouted. "This is trickery." But the humans didn't respond with more explosions. They didn't show themselves. They had already left. All that remained was a message burned into the station's wall. Strength without wisdom is weakness. Back on the homeworld, the War Council was furious. Some laughed it off, calling it cowardice, calling humans weak, but others looked deeper. How did they know our arrival time? One asked, how did they destroy our ships without a single fight? The Dravari were proud, but even pride can crack when met with mystery. Humans hadn't fought like any species before. They didn't roar into battle, didn't stand in lines with weapons raised. They struck like shadows, disappeared like ghosts, and left only questions. Kyle stood before the council, bruised but standing tall. "They humiliated us," he said. "But this is not defeat, it's an invitation. An invitation to a real war," the council agreed. And the Dravari began preparing their forces. Thousands of warriors trained harder, fleets were upgraded, and scouts were sent deeper into human space. They wanted revenge. They wanted a fair battle. But they still believed they were the stronger race. Still believed that the humans were afraid to face them directly. They were wrong. The humans were not hiding. They were planning, watching, waiting for the perfect moment. And when that moment came, the galaxy would learn that humans didn't just survive war. They mastered it. Asterisk night fell over Outpost Sigma 12, a mid-level Dravari military station on the edge of their territory. It was a stronghold built to resist full invasions, with energy, shields, turrets, and 200 trained warriors. But that night, everything changed. The guards stood at their posts, their red eyes scanning the distant stars. They had heard the rumors, whispers of disappearing patrols, ghost strikes, and silent ships. Still, they laughed it off, calling humans cowards who didn't know how to fight like real warriors. But then, the lights flickered, the main tower went dark, and every screen inside blinked into static. Commander Tharn rushed to the control room, shouting for a status report. No one responded. His voice echoed in silence. Then a soft humming sound filled the air. Low and smooth like wind through metal, drones, silent and small, drifted through the halls like shadows. They moved without sound, blinking blue in the dark. One by one, the guards fell, some hit by sleep darts, others wrapped in wires that pulled them down like prey. No alarm sounded. No one had time to scream. When the backup power came on 20 minutes later, the entire station was empty. 200 warriors gone. No blood, no bodies. Just empty halls and powered-down armor scattered across the floor. The only thing left was a human-made data cube, playing the same words again and again. You fight with fire, but we fight with the dark. Back on the Dravari homeworld, fear began to creep into the council chamber. The warriors, once proud and loud, now spoke in whispers. They could not understand this enemy, these humans. They didn't act like warriors, they acted like hunters. What kind of species doesn't face their enemy? A general roared, smashing his fist on the table, but the elder tactician, old and scarred from many battles, spoke quietly. They are not afraid, he said. They are calculating. We train for combat, but they train for victory. Reports came flooding in from other outposts. Destroyed hangars, stolen supplies, weapons rendered useless overnight. Each time, the humans left no trace except a message or symbol. Sometimes a sentence, sometimes a symbol of Earth, sometimes just a quiet warning. The Dravari began to sleep in shifts, waking in fear, their weapons always in hand. Some warriors refused to leave the cities. Even the strongest captains started locking their doors at night. In one base, a squad tried to ambush a group of humans they spotted in the forest. But when they reached the area, they found only burning trees and the smell of ozone. Suddenly, their comms turned on, and a human voice whispered, "You never saw us." Then the trees exploded into light and sound distraction tech. The squad was knocked out cold, their weapons useless in the blast. They woke up tied to trees with their armor removed and a simple note pinned to one of them. Lesson 1. Never chase ghosts. Within weeks, the Dravari war machine began to stall. How do you fight what you can't see? How do you defend against silence? The humans didn't destroy cities or demand surrender. They played with minds, cracked morale, and vanished again like mist. The Dravari had always believed war was loud, brutal, and glorious. But the humans were teaching them something new. War could be quiet. War could be clever. War could come without a sound, like a shadow in the dark. Commander Kao returned to the council. His pride dimmed but not gone. They're testing us, he said. They want to break us before the real fight begins. They are not cowards, they are predators. The council argued for hours. Some wanted to strike hard, to burn human colonies in retaliation. Others begged to understand their enemy first, to learn their ways before it was too late. But even as they spoke, another outpost went silent, and another, and another. The fear grew like smoke in a sealed room. One thing was now clear. This was no longer a war the Dravari understood. They were no longer the hunters, they were the hunted, and the humans were just getting started. The Dravari were no longer laughing. Weeks had passed, and the silence from their outposts grew louder than explosions ever could. It was clear now, the humans weren't just enemies, they were shadows, they were nightmares made of logic and calm precision. But the Dravari were warriors, and warriors do not run, they adapt, they fight. They set traps. Commander Vaithor, the most ruthless strategist in the Empire, stepped forward with a plan. "Let us give them what they want," he said, voice cold and sharp. "A perfect little colony. Rich in resources, quiet, vulnerable. A tempting target." The plan was simple. Build a fake colony on planet Arc 7. Leave it seemingly unprotected. No shields, no guards, no weapon systems on the surface. But underground, thousands of Dravari warriors waited. Silent, hidden, hungry for revenge, the trap was set in motion. A fake distress signal was transmitted, just loud enough for human scouts to detect. It was a message of weakness, a whisper saying, "Come take us." Then they waited 3 days. Passed, nothing. On the 4th day, a Dravari patrol spotted something moving in the clouds. Black shapes, quick and strange. "Target sighted," the command post reported. The soldiers underground gripped their blades, their blasters' hearts. Racing, revenge was close, but as the shapes descended, something was wrong. They weren't soldiers, they were machines small. Dark drones with glowing blue eyes and no sound. They hovered, scanned the area, and vanished. An hour later, the power went out. Across the entire colony, backup systems failed. Emergency. Lights didn't turn on. It was complete darkness. Then came the music, a soft, eerie tune played through every comlink. A human voice whispered, "You set the stage, so we wrote the ending." Explosions ripped through the underground tunnels, not enough to kill, just enough to disorient. Flashbangs burst, sound grenades echoed, and smoke poured into every room. The warriors couldn't see, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. When the lights finally came back, every Dravari soldier lay tied or unconscious, weapons removed, traps disabled. Their helmets stacked in the center of the room like a mockery. On the wall, a message glowed in Earth's language. Lesson 2, never bait what hunts. Commander Vay Thayer, captured and humiliated, stared at the words in disbelief. His trap had become their theater. He thought he was clever, but the humans were already 5 moves ahead. Back on the Dravari homeworld, this incident shattered what pride remained. This wasn't just a loss, it was public embarrassment. Footage of the failed trap was leaked by the humans themselves, broadcasted across neutral systems, even enemy races laughed at the mighty Dravari falling for their own bait. The council fell into chaos. Some called for full war, some demanded retreat, others whispered the unthinkable. Maybe we were wrong. Commander Kahl sat in silence, watching the footage of his warriors tied up like children, but instead of anger, he felt something colder. "Respect these humans," he said softly. "They don't just win battles, they tell stories with them. They make lessons out of victory. They don't seek our destruction. They want to teach us something." But not everyone agreed. The radical warlord Krevek, the Red, famous for burning moons, slammed his blade into the floor. "There is no honor in being humiliated," he roared. "If they want war, we give them fire." He seized control of a fleet and prepared for a full assault on Earth's outer colonies. No more tricks, no more traps, just raw Dravari rage. But what Krevek didn't know was that this too was part of the human plan. Because humans didn't need to win with numbers. They just needed their enemy to act without thinking, to burn with anger, to make a mistake, and Krevek was about to make the biggest mistake of all. The Dravari had reached their boiling point. Honor had been twisted into shame. Battles turned into puzzles they couldn't solve, and now, the wild warlord, Krevek the Red, had taken matters into his own hands. He launched a full assault on a human communication hub in Sector D-17. No tricks, no traps, just fire, metal, and rage. The human station fell within minutes, or so Krevek believed. He stood among the flames, roaring with victory. Dravari banners waved high. His soldiers cheered, fists raised. But then static filled the sky. And all at once, the fire stopped, not extinguished, paused. Holograms blinked to life all around the station. From each angle, a woman's face appeared calm, collected, human, her eyes sharp like a blade but voice soft like snow. "I am Commander Reeves, lead strategist of Earth's unified fleet," she said. "You have attacked a relay station. There were no weapons here. No soldiers, only diplomats and communication officers." Krevek's jaw clenched, his pride boiling again. "This is war," he growled. "There are no rules." But Reeves only smiled. "Then that explains your confusion," she replied. "Because we follow rules, and you walked right into them." The ground beneath Krevek rumbled. Energy fields burst from the soil. and the entire Dravari strike force was locked in stasis. Weapons froze mid-air, armor locked down. Not one soldier could move, not one could scream. You see, Reeves continued, we knew this was coming, because we know you. Your anger, your tactics, your thirst for pride. You walked right into the story we wrote for you. Kravec roared again. Cowardice. But her eyes narrowed. No, she said. Control. Behind her, another screen activated. It showed footage of humans protecting Dravari civilians during earlier attacks, of medics pulling injured Dravari from rubble, of food being shared, water being offered, even while fighting a war. The humans had chosen to protect the innocent. You think we are weak because we do not crush the helpless. Reeves said, but strength without mercy is just savagery. And we are not savages. In the Dravari council chamber, the broadcast played live, across planets, on warships. Even in underground bunkers, millions watched in silence. As Commander Reeves stood tall before their most feared warlord, and didn't even raise her voice. She's not fighting, one council member whispered. She's teaching. Another murmured. In the field, Kravec's soldiers lowered their eyes. Some began to realize they hadn't just lost the fight, they'd lost the meaning of it, Commander. Reeves stepped closer to the camera, her face filling every screen. We do not seek your surrender. She said, we do not seek revenge. We seek understanding. But if you continue to push, we will show you what humans become when we stop holding back. Then, with a quiet hand signal, she released the stasis field. Kravec and his soldiers collapsed to the ground, stunned and defeated, but no human blade touched them. No shot was fired, only silence. The warlord looked around, his army could barely stand. And yet, the humans chose to walk away. That moment broke something inside him. Not his bones, but his certainty. Back on the homeworld, the council sat frozen. Some still called for retaliation, but others, especially the young, began to question everything they had been taught. One young officer whispered, what if they're not our enemies? Another said, what if they're our mirror? And for the first time in centuries, the Dravari began to wonder, what if being strong meant more than just fighting? The stars above Sector X-91 burned red, not because of suns, but because Warlord Kravec's fleet had arrived. 60 warships, 10 cruisers, and one massive dreadnought, the Iron Maw. He had failed to defeat the humans with traps. He had been humiliated by their words. Now he wanted one thing only: fire. We burned them, he growled, standing before his captains. No more messages, no more games. We turned their colonies to ash. The target was simple: New Avalon, a human colony on the edge of galactic space, peaceful, growing, undefended, or so he believed. Kravec's fleet dropped out of hyperspace with the force of a thunderclap. His warships surrounded the colony like a storm of metal. His soldiers cheered, ready to strike. But then nothing, no alarms from the human side. No fleet rising to defend, just silence. Kravec smiled. Cowards to the end, he muttered. He ordered the bombardment. Dozens of energy blasts flew toward New Avalon's surface. But just as they reached the atmosphere, the sky lit up blue: a shield they couldn't see until it activated. A shield built to absorb, not deflect. The energy blasts vanished without impact. The colony below was untouched, calm, and then, from the darkness behind Kravec's fleet, they came, the Terran Defense Fleet. 30 sleek black ships, silent and cold. No glowing engines, no roaring guns, just precision and speed. They didn't charge, they didn't announce. They simply struck one by one. Kravec's ships began to fall, not exploded, disabled. Every engine hit, every weapon system shut down. Like humans had studied every part of the ships, knew exactly where to strike. Where is their signal? One Dravari shouted, why don't we see them on the scanners? But it was too late. The Iron Maw was next, a series of small, silent blasts along its hull, perfect surgical shots. It drifted in space, powerless, Spinning slowly like a wounded beast, Krevek stood on the command bridge, heart racing. How? He whispered. There. Invisible. Suddenly, a human ship uncloaked just meters in front of his window. Not large, not threatening, just there, inside. A figure stood still. Commander Reeves, not speaking, not smiling. Just watching. Then his screen lit up with a single message. Strength is measured in restraint. Krevek collapsed into his chair. Not from wounds, but from understanding. He hadn't fought warriors, he had fought masters. And they didn't just destroy. They chose not to. The humans could have wiped them out. Turned every ship into dust, but instead, they left them alive. Back on the Dravari homeworld, news of the failed assault hit like a wave. The footage of Krevek's defeat spread fast. First in whispers, then in fire, young warriors stared in silence. Not at the defeat, but at the control. The humans hadn't fought for victory, they fought to teach. One message began repeating across every screen in the Empire. A message sent directly from Commander Reeves herself. We are not your enemy, unless you insist on becoming ours. We defend, we protect, we endure. But if you force our hand, we will end the fight before you know it began. The old warriors fell quiet. The proud ones began to listen. And the young? They began to wonder, what if the future wasn't about battle cries and fire? What if true power was choosing not to use it? And for the first time, the Dravari Empire began to see the humans not as enemies, but as something much more dangerous. Teachers. Warlord Krevek sat alone in the detention cell aboard a human cruiser. The room was clean, quiet, and strangely warm. No chains, no pain. No shouting guards, just silence and questions. He had expected torture. He had prepared to die. But none of that happened. Instead, a human walked in. Not a soldier, not a spy. A teacher. She placed a book on the table between them and sat down gently. Krevek blinked, confused. What is this? He growled. She smiled, her voice soft. It's history, she said. Human history. Krevek narrowed his eyes. I don't want your stories. But the human didn't leave. She opened the book, showing images of Earth's past wars, ruins, burning cities. Broken children. We were like you once, she said. Proud, angry, loud. We destroyed each other for centuries. Krevek leaned forward, not because he cared, but because he saw something in those images, familiar pain. He saw fire raining over cities. He saw warriors holding the bodies of friends. He saw strength used like a hammer until nothing was left. We learned the hard way. The teacher continued, that war without wisdom is suicide. So we stopped worshiping blood. We started honoring restraint. Krevek didn't speak. His fists tightened, but his heart listened. Far away on the Dravari homeworld, a change was starting. Young cadets once raised on chance of conquest now watched the human broadcasts in silence. They saw how humans trained, not just to fight, but to think. Their battles were like games of strategy, their soldiers calm, their machines clean, fast, and precise. Some Dravari students started mimicking their formations. Others tried meditating like human commanders for the first time. Dravari students began asking questions instead of sharpening their blades. In one academy, a group of warrior apprentices wrote a message to Earth's fleet. They didn't ask for weapons, they didn't ask for power. They asked for books, and Earth responded within weeks. Crates of knowledge were delivered to Dravari schools, books, holograms, training simulations, not as trophies, but as gifts. The council argued endlessly. The elders called it weakness. The young called it hope. Commander Kyle stood before the High Council, his armor cracked, his voice low. We can no longer win the way we used to, he said, because this isn't about winning anymore. This is about surviving what comes next. The council laughed until the human broadcast changed. On every screen across the Empire, a message played. This time not from Commander Reeves, but from an Earthchild. She held a drawing, two figures standing side by side, one human, one Dravari. She smiled shyly and said, "My daddy says enemies can become friends." If they stop fighting and start learning, the room fell silent. Because that child had done what no fleet ever could. She made them feel ashamed. Ashamed not because they lost, but because they never asked why they were fighting. Krevek, still inside the human ship, finally looked up at the teacher. "Why didn't you kill us?" he asked. She smiled again. "Because we didn't want you to be destroyed," she said. "We wanted you to change, and for the first time in his life." Krevek had no answer. The battlefield was now a garden, where once smoke and fire had choked the sky. Now stood trees and soft winds. On the former war world of Zereth Prime, a new academy had been built. Not a fortress, not a barracks, but a place of learning. Young warriors walked through wide marble halls, some with scales and red eyes, others with soft skin and human smiles. The flags of two empires hung side by side, Earth and Dravari, and below them, carved into the stone, were the words, "Wisdom is the sharpest blade." Commander Kal, once feared, now walked calmly through the academy courtyard. Beside him, Commander Reeves, the woman who had defeated him without ever raising a weapon. Together, they watched the first human Dravari squad train together, not in combat drills, but in teamwork, strategy, survival, and diplomacy. "They're faster than I expected," Kal admitted. "They're learning trust," Reeves replied. "That's faster than any reflex." Among the students was a young Dravari girl named Thera. She was the daughter of a soldier who once fought humans with pride. Now she sparred with a human boy named Liam, not to hurt each other, but to understand. When she stumbled, Liam reached out to help her. She hissed in surprise. It was not the Dravari way. But he didn't let go. He smiled and said, "You're not my enemy." For a moment, Thera froze. Then she nodded slowly, and together they stood. News of the academy spread across the galaxy. Worlds that once feared the Dravari now sent their own students to learn from them. Other warrior species began asking Earth for training alliances. They no longer wanted war, they wanted balance. Even Krevek, the warlord who once screamed for fire, now walked in silence through the academy's halls. He taught a class once a week, not in combat, but in failure. He told young warriors how pride had blinded him, how humans defeated him without hate, and how that defeat saved his people from extinction. "I used to think fire was strength," he would say. "Now I know self-control burns brighter." On the 10th anniversary of the first human Dravari contact, a monument was revealed. A tall sculpture of two hands reaching for each other, one clawed, one human. Children placed flowers beneath it. Some whispered wishes, some saluted. All stood in silence. Reeves gave a speech that day, not to boast, but to remind, peace is not the end of war, she said. It is the hardest victory. It requires courage to step back, to listen, to forgive, to try again. You were once our enemies, she said, looking at the Dravari cadets. Now you are the future. Cheers rose from the crowd, not of warriors, but of builders, healers, dreamers. Later that night, as the stars shone above, Kal stood alone in the garden. He looked up at the sky and whispered, "They thought they understood combat." A pause, a small smile, until they met us. Then he looked down at the academy, glowing with lights and life, and we thought we understood power, he sighed, until they showed us what it really meant. The end.